Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Because of some of the recent updates that we've seen in Warzone, we've got some different attachments now that are pretty viable, specifically when it comes to the Vanguard guns. Of course, before, basically every single setup was the exact same between the stocks, the underbarrels, the rear grips, the perks, but now there's a lot more variety. But on top of that, there's also some hidden weapon stats that you might not realize are in effect in game. Some attachments don't pair well with others. Others have secret bonuses that are not listed in game. So today, I wanted to go over some of these secret stats that are actually live right now in game so that you guys can be aware of them and adjust your classes accordingly. So as we go through it all today, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new here or if you have not already subscribed, every day I got you covered with all things going on in COD. So feel free to hit that sub button and turn on those post notifications. Also, quick reminder, right now my G Fuel discount code WhosImmortal is boosted to get you 30% off your entire order. So right now is quite literally the best time to grab anything at all from the site. A new tub, a shaker cup, a starter pack, anything like that. Code WhosImmortal has you covered. Link will be down in the description below. So first things first here, I do just want to clarify some pretty frequent questions I get when it comes to underbarrels, specifically because of some of the recent updates. You know, of course, before, basically, if you weren't running hand stop on 90% of your weapons, your rifles, your subs, your LMGs, you probably were not building a setup correctly. Hand stop was a dominant meta attachment for quite some time. However, they have made significant changes over the past few updates that have really changed this meta. And now I get a lot of questions saying, Zach, what is the best underbarrel for this gun? What is the best general underbarrel? And to be honest, the answer is there is not a best general underbarrel anymore. It is completely weapon specific. Really, the three that come in play here, that come into question for control, are hand stop, Carver foregrip, and strife angled. And as you guys can see by the descriptions, they've been slightly updated. Carver foregrip helps with vertical control and hip fire accuracy. It slows down your ADS speed, like specifically on the AS44, I think it's by 10 or 11 milliseconds. Hardly noticeable at all, but it focuses specifically on vertical control. So if you have a weapon like the automaton, for instance, that has directly vertical control or a recoil pattern, Carver would be the best. Whereas something like the Type 100 that has a lot of horizontal bounce, the strife angled underbarrel focuses specifically on horizontal control and not vertical, whereas hand stop does a little bit of vertical and a little bit of horizontal, but not as much as either the strife angled or Carver in their respective areas. So just use that to judge your future setups. If you're using a weapon that's got a lot of vertical movement, Carver. If you're using something that has a lot of horizontal, strife angled. And if you're using something that has a little bit of both and you just want some decent control, hand stop. So hopefully that clears that up. Now moving on, when it comes to these secret weapon stats, obviously that first bit there, not as secret, but it's a little bit lesser known just because there is some confusion surrounding those underbarrels. But we've seen in the past how certain things have done some rather strange bonuses. Like for instance, if you were to go to on hand, they've since updated this, but previously on hand just gave you better equipment dexterity, and that was it. Lo and behold, we came to find out that secretly on hand also increased your aim down sight speed, and now in game you can see it does help with aim down sight speed, but that wasn't something that was recognized at first officially in game. It was just a secret stat. Now we have something else similar to that, but in perk 1, and it's unfortunately not as readily available as on hand would be, but this is tied to disable. As you guys can see, the official description here says striking enemies in the legs will briefly disable their tactical sprint and slow their movement speed. No cons, the pro is hitting enemy legs slows movement. Now right off the bat, if you were to just go off of the gameplay here and what it says, disable is a pretty useless perk. Like, you don't want to be aiming for the legs at all in any situation. You want to be aiming for chest, neck, and head to get optimal TTKs. So it's a pretty useless perk in most reality, in most gunfights, right? But lo and behold, thanks to SimGG, we can see exactly what a certain perk or attachment does in game according to the data mined files, exactly how it works in game. So let's see what happens if we were to throw on disable. So as you guys can see here, I'm just gonna build the AS44 right away. I'm not messing with anything. I'm not throwing on any attachments. These are the raw weapon stats right here. If I were to go to perk 1 and throw on disable, you guys can see the muzzle velocity actually increases from 900 to 945.5. And you can see over here, disable, increased muzzle velocity. Now we know how advantageous velocity is in game. It is such a huge factor. That's why on all the long range weapons, we try and use lengthened as an ammunition perk, because for medium and long range, better velocity means less bullet drop off, and that's a huge upgrade. That's a huge significant impact in a one-on-one gunfight or a one-on-two gunfight, any gunfight at all, if I'm being honest with you. So the fact that disable actually ends up helping with your muzzle velocity is huge. It actually gives meaning to running disabled on a certain setup. Now, of course, in certain situations, there are better perks than just velocity. Something like tight grip is oftentimes very useful. Acrobatic or gung-ho or quick in certain cases too, but for what it's worth, disable turns out it's not completely useless, and as of right now, it does help out with muzzle velocity. I imagine in the future that's either going to be fixed via an update, or they're going to end up adding it on as an actual perk, just like what we saw with On Hand, where it now officially says, yes, it increases ADS speed. Disable in the future will say slows enemy movement, but also increases velocity. I don't understand how that works, but it's a thing that is happening in game right now. Now, another super important thing to take note of, and this applies to the vast majority of weapons based on the setups that we use for Vanguard guns, when you have things like the custom stock here on the AS-44 or the padded stock on the Automaton, anything in game that says accuracy and recoil increase during sustained fire, or you have things that help with initial firing recoil. Those are super important to take note of. You might just think it's recoil, it all works the same. I can have an underbarrel that helps with recoil. I can have a stock that helps with initial firing recoil. I could have a rear grip that helps with sustained fire recoil. Turns out that's not the case. And I imagine this is not intended. It very well could be, but it'd be weird. But for instance, if I were to use the custom stock here on the AS-44, which, like I said, helps with recoil during sustained fire, and I were to also use something like polymer, then I would have no issues, because that, for instance, is the same recoil properties stacking on top of each other: recoil during sustained fire and recoil during sustained fire. Now, if brace were a perk here that has initial firing recoil, I wouldn't be able to run that because it actually make the recoil changes obsolete. And I'll explain exactly how that works. Again, we can see that on sim. So we'll actually look at the Cooper here because it offers brace as a perk, which is a great example. Brace, as we know, helps with the initial firing control. If I were to scroll down a little bit here, you guys can see initial gun kick is better, and initial gun kick here on the stats is better. You can see the kick is not as much. Now, we'll erase that momentarily. Let's look at a stock here really quick. The 45 RS. It, for instance, helps out with initial firing recoil. As we can see, initial gun kick is better. So we'll throw on that, we'll throw on brace together. You can see the initial gun kick here becomes significantly better. However, let's say we want good initial firing recoil, but we also want to have the polymer grip on here, which, as we know, helps with recoil during sustained fire. If I were to do that, suddenly there's no benefit. You can see sustained gun kick does not change at all. What happens if I were to delete brace though? Initial firing kick. You can see it actually gets worse for some reason, and there's no initial firing kick happening from the 45 RS stock. If I were to remove that, suddenly we have better sustained fire recoil and we have no initial gun kick. So you can have these different attachments that have sustained fire recoil, initial firing recoil, and you can stack them with each other, sustained and sustained. But if you start to mix and match initial and sustained, that's where things get a little bit tricky, because it just simply does not work. For instance, the padded stock here helps out with sustained fire control. You can see that. It also hurts the initial firing control. If we were to throw on polymer, it's going to help out with that sustained kick even more, so we don't have to worry about that. You can see brace here is not equipped yet, but if we were to do that, nothing changes, and it actually makes everything we do with polymer and the padded stock obsolete. It removes that entirely. Now, that obviously is a problem because you're basically putting on all these control aspects and it doesn't help out the gun. So it does appear to be a glitch in game, at least according to the data mine stats here. Again, this is coming directly from the game files, so this is what you see in game when you end up equipping this stuff. Very interesting. In my opinion, the most surprising to me is that disable is not a completely useless perk, but also the fact that you really got to pay attention to which recoil benefits you're stacking is huge, because you can screw up a lot of setups because of that. Now, that said, you can go ahead and use Carver for basic control or hand stop for basic control, all the same with like hatch grip, but anything that has to do with sustained recoil or initial recoil, make sure you are matching those up with each other and not interchanging between the two for the time being until we get an official clarification from Raven as to what's going on there. But that said, that is going to wrap things up for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. I will catch you guys later. Peace out.